This just might be the best video on YouTube right now talking about hens and chicks or sempervivums. There's snow on the ground right now, so I'm going to be inside talking about these plants. But hens and chicks are some of my favorite plants to grow. You might be wondering why, so that's why I'm going to talk about them in this video. This right here might be, the one variety that everyone has had. It's basic, it's dull, it's boring, it's green. The only color comes from the edges of the leaves, and that basically fades to all green eventually. Like, it's just an olive green, boring color. The shape is cool, and some of you might like that, but now you've got yellows, you've got reds, you've got oranges, you've got a bunch of different traits that I'm going to talk about right now that are in hens and chicks that you got to look for in each variety or whatnot. Have you guys ever seen lotus blossom? Well, what about oddity? Have you ever seen gold nugget? Have you ever seen Saxon? There's a bunch of different varieties out there that are really, really cool. But each plant can have a bunch of different traits. Striping is one of the coolest traits that exists in only a couple of varieties, such as, this variety right here. But then splotchiness. Splotchiness is another cool trait that exists in hens and chicks. Also, variegation. Lotus blossom is a variety of hen and chick or sempervivum that I will have this year. Lotus blossom is really pretty because of that variegation, but there's other varieties as well. Also, watermarks are something that exists in a lot of different plants, of these different species or whatnot, but the watermarks make some plants incredibly, incredibly pretty. I believe this might be red rum or just a red variety. I think that I'm going to include, there's one called Watermark King and a bunch of different varieties that have watermarks. I have varieties that have watermarks and stuff like that, but some get them way more pronounced. It's a waxy layering in the leaf that makes them appear wavy and just really, really pretty. Also, the size. Of course, with the different species, there's different sizes and stuff, but then there's also the giants, which I'll show you from this one company right here. They have the biggest ones on the market right now. And basically, there's also clump formation. These plants form, clumps, but each variety might have a different way of clumping. It might produce a different number of babies, and the bloom color might be different. The winter coloration, the spring coloration might be different. The goal of some different companies is basically to take those traits that I just told you about and to basically take those traits and make them more pronounced, whether it's striping that you can actually see, because this variety right here, the parent plant didn't have really the most visible striping, pretty much no striping at all. But they somehow were able to selectively breed each of these plants to come up with just crazy varieties. They might even be genetically modifying these things, but basically what happens is you've got this basic boring variety, and then they have another variety. They basically make that, and next thing you know, it's got a little bit more pink or something in the plant, a little more of this, a little bit more of that, and then also the genetics are a little weird, but then this plant might have a genetic mutation which happens on its own or whatnot, and then next thing you know, you've got a completely new variety of plant. This happens with a whole bunch of different plants. The perennials that you have in your gardens are probably the result of a genetic mutation, potentially a genetic mutation, potentially on the plant. A new piece arrives, the next thing you know, it's got white in the leaves. That's a new variegated plant. That's what happens in the plant world. So talking about species, I'm not going to pronounce these the best, but there's calcearium varieties, there's Jovibarba, Arachnoidum, Hufali, and Tectorum is the most common species. And obviously there's over 1,000 varieties of hens and chicks. So then some of them are mixes, but let's talk about each one, or what I know about each one. Calcearium. Extra is my favorite one that I've got right now, but there's a lot of different mutations and stuff, such as oddity. There's also red oddity or whatnot. There's also, a bunch of different varieties out there of calcearium or calcarium or however you pronounce that are really unique and fun. There's rolling types. They're really, really tiny. They basically spread and multiply really fast, even though they're small. And then there's the arachnoidum. there's just, they have webbing on them. It looks like a spider web. They're really, really cool. Here's shampoo, or maybe some other varieties. And then also Hufalai, they basically clump together, and if you want to multiply them, they do grow and multiply themselves, but you basically got to cut them. And those are really cool. But then Tectorum, there's different species that are mixed, but Tectorum is just the most common one. That doesn't mean the variety is Tectorum. Basically, you know, you've got this one right here is a Tectorum variety, I imagine. And so obviously with those, there's different colors. Like I said, there's those yellow ones, there's pink ones, there's orange, and the traits, they're getting a bunch of different traits that, you know, change with each variety. So each one is different. That means that they're collectible. I've really heavily got into these plants, and after this year, I'll probably have like 60 different varieties. And I'll have some of the newest varieties, but then I'll also have some old varieties. And my goal is to have, you know, the ones with the best watermarks, ones with striping, ones with, you know, the mutated ones. Also, cresting happens with a bunch of different plants, but cresting happens with hens and chicks, you know, more than a lot of different plants. Like some of the succulents out there have cresting that's really cool, and it happens in the blooms, but then also the plant itself. And so that's what cresting is. There are also I just want to talk about the rock gardening right now. So just this past year, I created 4 different rock gardens. And the fun thing about rock gardens is you can take inspiration from a bunch of different pictures like these, and, you know, you can easily recreate them yourself. You can easily make them with just a few different things, and I'll talk about creating them in a second. But basically, rock gardens are colorful. They're unique. They're something that most people don't have. People have a rock in their gardens, but typically it's flat. With rock gardens, you basically have variations in the terrain. Like I said, they're just unique. They're easily changeable. You can move rocks around. You can mount it up higher. You can change out the plants. Maybe you found one with better coloration. You can easily take a plant that's like this big, throw it away and replace it, because some of the plants are so incredibly cheap. Or you can give them away, you could potentially sell them, or you could even create your own varieties. Like I said, they're abstract, so you can just kind of, you know, the gardens look like this, but then they have a flow to them. Like I said, there's just a bunch of pictures as I'm talking of them. They're decently low maintenance. You don't really have to water, and if there's a drought, you know, one watering can, you can pretty much go like that. The whole garden is taken care of, and you don't have to really worry too much about them. They're cold hardy down at like zone 3. That means like negative 30 degrees. That means pretty much if you're in the lower 48, you should be able to have them. Other than like Florida, you probably might not be able to have too many things that, you know, in Florida, but who knows? And are rocks required for rock gardens? This is another note I have. I'm talking about the mulch. They're not really required. I've got family members, and I've grown them and other sedums and succulents and stuff, you know, directly in the ground without, you know, with regular mulch. So, but rocks are going to probably do a better job at preventing rot, you know, bringing out the colors in the plants. But that might not be the case for you. Maybe you just want to buy, you know, one of these gold nuggets from me, plant it, you know, in among your flower bed at the front, and see what happens. It doesn't really matter that much. But also, pots and containers allow you to collect, but then they also allow you to not really have to have rocks in your garden. You can have a pot that you buy a bag of, you know, stuff, and you can basically change out what's in the pot as far as the, you know, the soil mix goes, but then you can also change out the rocks. You can even collect crystals. You can put glass. You can put garden art in them. But the different varieties and the different species, you put varying different colors and species in with each other, they look really, really cool, as you can see. Some varieties spread differently than others, creating a cool effect like this. And you know, and they allow you to move the pot around. Some people have overhangs, you know, porches. That's a perfect place because you can water once a week and the plants will probably be happier than in other places. Or maybe they want more sun. Maybe they want more shade. Who knows? And that's pretty much that. There's also wide leaf varieties or skinny leaf varieties. The skinny leaf varieties are really cool. And Splatter Matters is one that you're probably going to want to get as far as the newest varieties. But I might not, I might not be appreciated for sharing these pictures. But here's a bunch that are being created. They're being trialed by people. They're not being talked about because they're not allowed to talk about them, but these pictures right here were posted, so I'm sharing them to you right now of some different varieties that are unlike some of the other varieties that have, the best traits combined into one. Hundreds of thousands of seedlings were basically grown to create some of these varieties right here. I think I talked about the monocarpic death blooms. Don't be afraid of the monocarpic aspect of these plants. They're gonna grow a bloom, they're gonna be pretty, it's gonna die, but then the whole plant won't die. They're gonna basically create space for the plant to fill in, remove that dead bloom, and the blooms are good for pollinators. You might see more hummingbirds, you might see more butterflies, you might even see new species of different pollinators that you might not have ever seen before. As far as like bugs that affect them, they do affect them. I've had them, but it's easy enough to spray them or whatnot. And yeah, hopefully you guys are sticking along. But basically, as far as companions for the rock gardens, I mean, just look at pictures, recreate them yourself. It's really easy to get, a yucca color guard and put it at the top of the mound and have some different ajugas throughout it. Ajugas are a great companion, especially if you've got rocks, because they really seem to like rocks because they are susceptible to rot. Japanese bloodgrass is in some of the best rock gardens that I've seen. Also, obviously, sedums and succulents. There's a bunch of fun varieties of sedums out there that go really, really well with hens and chicks. And the key is just to go with bright and colorful plants for your rock garden. That also means purple next to green, lime green or whatnot, yellow next to purple, or red with, blue. You're going to have all the different colors and all the different textures if you have a rock garden. Also, make sure you have that variation in your garden. So, it's no secret that Garden Solutions right here has some of the best examples of rock gardens, and maybe they're watching this right now. You're one of my favorite companies right now, and that's why I'm making this video. That's why you got me into collecting hens and chicks, and that's why you got hundreds of thousands or thousands of people into collecting hens and chicks. Here's, an example of some of Garden Solutions sedums right now. Garden Solutions is well known for their Sun Sparkler series of sedums, but this is where I talk about some drama. These are their chick charms, and chick charms are basically just branded hens and chicks. And if you look at the tag on a few of these hens and chicks, you will see a different name than the branded name. And some of those existed well before chick charms even started. So some of these plants are not exactly created from the, chick charms. Some of these varieties, and a lot of them, there's like 26 or 28 varieties, they existed before them. There was one called Mint Marvel that existed way before this company was really a thing. And basically this company took a plant that already existed, and basically they put chick charms on the tag, they branded it, so you could sell it as the old variety if you wanted, but the name Mint Marvel was not allowed to be, you're not allowed to propagate it as Mint Marvel. You could do Miss Giuseppe or whatever it was, but then next thing you know, they had issues with that variety, so then they changed it. They changed it to a completely another, plant that looks just like that. They still branded it as Mint Marvel, and so you might think that's a little bit sketchy. I think that what this company needs to do is, a lot of the plants that they have, They're still pretty, but what they are moving towards is having a catalog full of their own plants, their own enhanced genetics, their own enhanced traits. So they've got striped plants, they've got the new red and yellows, and some of the giants and stuff. Those plants are basically created from them. Some of their sedums are fully from them, such as the Blue Ox sedum, the Neon Nova sedum, or maybe even the Dazzling Dynamite and Dream Dazzler sedum. So this company is mainly, you know, just a great company all around. The start isn't the best, and what I would like to see you guys do in the future is basically create those bright, fun, unique varieties, and, you know, market yourselves on your created plants, and not the plants that some people might argue that you stole. You know, you've got one heck of a catalog here of plants, and the best varieties are the ones that you created. And you might make some money off of the ones that you used to sell, but I guarantee you they have a whole bunch of different seedlings in evaluation, and they might not want to make a whole bunch of new tags for those plants. But basically, that's a little bit of drama. I've seen people who said that they were blocked by the creator of this company because of the stuff that they believe. They believe that this company is basically taking pre-existing plants, marketing them for themselves, and making potentially millions of dollars. And that might be true, but the truth of the matter is they are creating new and unique, exciting plants. And moving forward, I believe that this company is moving towards a better direction. And also, this company doesn't create 100% their own plants. They have another person who wrote a book that I have right next to me, and basically they basically pay royalties for each of those plants to that guy, and they sell, you know, their plants as, you know, their own. But it's all legal, and they're all, you know, they all shake hands, and it's all an agreement that that's okay or whatnot. Hopefully you guys understand what I just said there. But basically, this is a really fun company, a really cool company, and I'll probably end up meeting the owner, talking to him about that type of drama, and talk to him mainly about some of the fun, cool varieties. This right here is Gold Nugget mixed with one of those Arachnoidum, the hairy varieties. And then they got this variety right here. There's a lot of things to learn about the different hens and chicks that's unique and exciting. And, you know, also I've got tons of Chicktrons Giants. And basically they get massive. They get 12 inches across. That was created by a guy named Kevin Vaughn. And Kevin Vaughn basically selectively bred those things. And basically from that, he gets paid royalties for every Chicktrons Giant he sells, or this company sells, and it's all in agreement. It's all good, it's all fine, and we get to enjoy, you know, the creations from Kevin. They've also got ajugas and different things available, as well as, you know, different packs for other succulents and things. So the reason why I'm talking about Garden Solutions is because they are basically the main person out there right now that is breeding hens and chicks and sedums and things like that. Sedums, they're a little bit more widely known and, you know, grown, and because you can plant them pretty much wherever and they survive. But Garden Solutions, like I said, they're the main person. Not too many people are out there growing hundreds and hundreds of thousands of seedlings potentially. Not too many people are out there tissue culturing plants, you know, mass producing them on the level that they are. Perennial Obsessions is a place that has like 1,000 varieties out there. They're in Oregon, and basically they aren't really coming up with new varieties. They have grown, you know, from what little I know about them, they have grown, you know, seedlings or whatnot, but Garden Solutions is pretty much leading the United States right now when it comes to hens and chicks. They are producing the newest varieties, and that's why it's important that they pretty much are, you know, creating the fun new varieties. They are the people that are going to be getting you guys and me and a bunch of other people into hens and chicks. So across, you know, the seas in Germany and some of the other countries, they are ahead of us the individuals there that are producing seedlings, they are producing seedlings that are, way, honestly, way cooler than a lot of the ones that are at Perennial Obsessions and Garden Solutions. They only, introduce 1 or 2 varieties a year, if that, like not really. And like I said, a lot of the varieties that they're selling aren't really theirs. So they're not really they're producing tons and tons of new plants, but a lot of those plants aren't being, sent out to the public. Whereas overseas in Germany or whatnot, they're a bunch of individuals, and a lot of those people might not be producing for the public, but they're producing for their own pleasure or whatnot. They're producing plants that have a bunch of different traits, and they are kind of ahead of us by like, miles when it comes to that, because there's individuals here that are producing things that have those traits that are like more pronounced and really cool. And a lot of the individuals out there are going to have plants that, no one else has, but just the people overseas, you know, the varieties are just insane. And also the reason why we don't have their varieties and stuff, and why they're not like, why I'm not like, well, why I can't just buy from Germany or some of the other countries. The reason why is you need like a phyto certificate and a bunch of other things, and to ship things overseas, especially living things, is very, very difficult. And I'm gonna have to probably look more into that. And but I know of an individual or whatnot who can sell flats of different things, trays of plants overseas, but maybe for some reason like receiving their plants is all very difficult. And because they're individuals and maybe not companies, they can't spend the money or the time or the energy to really ship things overseas, because there's a lot involved that goes into that process. I'm going to create more videos on these plants, probably YouTube shorts, but then a whole nother long form video on hens and chicks in the future, when you can actually see my plants, because I would have to dig out each plant to show you guys. But I'm excited. I've got geodes in my rock gardens. I'm trying to create unique rock gardens that other people might not have or seen before. So that's what I'm trying to turn you guys onto, buying some of the plants that I got from this company, which I do really enjoy. So I'm going to call this the best video on YouTube talking about hens and chicks, because, what video is out there with that many pictures and, even a video clip or whatnot, all the different species I talked about. And I know that I didn't get too crazy with it. I think that Jovi barba and Hoofly are basically the same species, I believe, or something like that. These plants, they originate from the mountains pretty much in like Europe or Asia, and where it does get cold but it doesn't get too wet. You're going to want to recreate that by using stones and stuff, maybe even in your potting mixture, bark mulch in your mounds and stuff like that. They want, you want to create a mound that's irregular, so then the water can drain off of it, because these plants don't like too much water. And so I wanted to make this video for the people who didn't know too much about hens and chicks, but then to raise awareness or whatnot, because I'm going to have so many different hens and chicks for sale, just this year, and then next year, and, years, moving forward. I'm also going to hopefully be breeding them eventually. So, I know that I included some drama that people probably think that I should have left out, but I really don't care. If I'm going to be spending, over $1,000 with Garden Solutions. So, like I said, they're one of my favorite companies, and 99% of people who grow plants that aren't theirs. They buy in plugs, they grow them out, and they sell them. They're not their own plants that they created, and so, basically hens and chicks, like I said, there's some really cool ones out there, and they're gonna get even better as time moves on. A lot of the varieties that you might buy from Perennial Obsessions were created or bred back in like 2000s, the 2003, 2005, pre-2010 or so. But, there's still a bunch of people all over the place who are creating new varieties. So I hope that you guys are excited to see what happens. There is a sempervivum forum. Maybe I'll even put a link in the description or whatnot about the sempervivum forum, where they're basically talking about how they're breeding new varieties and the varieties that they got. you know, the pros and cons, the struggles, and the, you know, all that type of stuff. And, but yeah, a lot of videos that are out there on this subject, they don't really get that too in-depth, or they get too in-depth and they don't talk about that many things. They don't include pictures or rock gardens and stuff like that. And there's some really cool rock gardens. You know, I created 4 new rock gardens this year. I'm looking to expand them. You know, there's a million different plants that you can plant in them, but a lot of plants out there, you know, they die because they get too much water, and that's one of those plants are hens and chicks. But that's why you might want to grow them in pots, so then they can drain a little bit better. But that's going to be it for this video. Let me know your thoughts, your ideas. You know, if Kevin or Chris Hansen or whatnot are watching this video, you know, you can reach out to me or whatnot anytime. Say like, hey, I didn't, you know, I didn't mean to say, you know, anything negative. Like I said, you're my favorite, one of my favorite companies out there. And, you know, I'm going to spend $1,000 with you, and I'm going to keep on spending money with you. And eventually all the plants that you're selling are going to be, you know, they're already my favorite plants. So Garden Solutions is my favorite company, just about. You know, they have basically my favorite plants come from them, and I recommend them to anyone, just not my local competition, because I don't want you selling the cool plants that I'm going to be selling. So thanks for watching again.